What's up everybody, this is Abnormal FPV. As you can see, I still haven't cleaned my workbench. I got asked by my neighbor buddy Dominic if I make a soldering tutorial. So we're just gonna do a really intro to soldering, and I'll try to focus on FPV a bit, but this applies to any electronics. So let's get into it. Alright. I laid out everything that you will need to start soldering with, and let's start with the soldering iron because it's probably my favorite thing. This is a Pinecil by Pine64. It's a portable soldering iron. It runs off USB-C and also has I think a 2.5 by 5.5 millimeter barrel jack. I'd have to confirm. It's either 2.5 or 2.1 millimeter by 5.5 millimeter, but either way, it needs 65 watts to run at full power. It's temperature controlled. It takes the TS101 tips. This is I think the KU tip, and I'll show you a little bit more about that later, but this is an awesome soldering iron. Even if you don't plan on using it, in the field for soldering, it's great for FPV. But it's even better, at home too. It's better than my other iron, I'll show you that. This is my old iron. It's a non-temperature controlled Weller station. Basically you set the wattage and the iron gets hot and there's a sponge tray. It's very, very basic. And this would work absolutely fine for 90% of the jobs that you need to do. Once you start getting into like micro soldering, then you might need to worry about, what tips you're getting, and it's hard to find tips for these. Took me a long time. So if you're gonna buy an iron, I'd suggest this. I think they're $25 or $30, and you really can't beat $25 or $30 for something that's this powerful. I mean, I soldered these battery leads off of a dead LiPo with this, and it didn't take too long. It's not like a Hako station, but either way, let's get on to the next stuff here. I've got a Mamba practice board. You can buy those probably on like racedayquads.com or pyrodrone.com, any of the FPV sites, but you could also just find, electronics and practice on that first. Something to note with these practice boards is there's no actual traces, so you won't be heating up more than the pad. It kind of gives you a poor representation as to how much heat you need to apply when you're actually doing the soldering. But it's good to, get a feel for how much solder and flux to use and practice with using the wires and stuff like that. Next, I've got some soldering wick. It's really good to have some wick in case, you do a bad job and you need to fix something, and this is probably my favorite way to do it. I have a solder sucker, but I don't like this. It's hard to really get it, get contact on the board sometimes, and like these big ones, it would probably work fine. Once you start doing little tiny through hole components, this doesn't really do the trick anymore. So that's why I say the wick is better, and you might as well have some of this before you get a solder sucker. Of course, you need some solder. This is from racedayquads.com. I don't know the actual branding of it, but it's their house solder in a 63-37 ratio of tin to lead. It has 2% flux. It's a 0.8 millimeter diameter, and I mean this is like, I think $2 to $4 for this container, and it lasts a long time. So you could get, some of this if you want to order it, or Kester is a good brand. You can get Kester solder on Amazon. 63-37 is probably what you want for electronics if you can get a hold of leaded solder. If not, good luck. You're going to be using silver, and it's a little harder. You definitely want to still have flux, even though it says there's flux in there. This is, it says it's a Flux Paste. I'll open that up here in a minute. I'm holding the camera with one hand. Okay, toothbrush for cleaning, of course. I don't have my alcohol out, but you want to have some isopropyl alcohol to clean the flux when you're done. Some wire strippers are nice to have. Not necessary, but I'll show you how they work in a minute, and then you can see once I do that you could easily use like a razor blade and then some pliers to get the job done anyway. I have flush cutters. Flush cutters are nice to have for FPV, especially because sometimes you'll solder on, you know, one of these smaller components and maybe you didn't trim your wires perfectly and there's a little hanging off and you have got wires overlapping wires. So you can go through and just snip if you'd like whatever's extra, and then you don't have to go back and resolder everything because it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough to get the job done, and then you can keep practicing on getting it perfect later. Alright, last but not least, I've got some more supplies here. Shrink tubing is good to have on hand when you're, you know, doing whatever jobs you're doing. Not for obviously the practice boards, but if you're splicing any wires or making connectors, you want to have some shrink tubing. I have my fun tack out again because it's pretty good to use some of the fun tack, and then you can put it on the back of your whatever you're soldering and press it onto the table so it doesn't move. I'm not going to use it for today, but it's good to have on hand just in case. And then I've got a tweezer set that's come in handy a bunch of times. Again, I probably won't be using this today, but if you have ever fixed any FPV stuff, you can see how tight it is inside the craft, and if you're out in the field, pulling out a pair of tweezers makes your life a lot easier too. Okay. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, I got the camera set up. I'm using this, I don't even know how to say the brand name. Inu? It doesn't really matter. This is a fast charge power bank from Amazon that delivers 65 watts, and it has PD 3.0 or something like that, which is what's needed to run the Pinecil to full power. So I got one of those. That way I can solder out in the field. You can also use a laptop charger, some type of power supply. As long as it delivers 65 watts, you should be good. And I did forget to add one thing, but I have a bunch of Popsicle Sticks for using the Flux. It makes life a bit easier. So yeah, I'm gonna open this up, and the iron's already hot. I just plugged it in. You can see it smoking already. So this might be a good time to say, do this in a well-ventilated area, maybe not around children and pets. My family's left me to my own devices today, so I'm good to go. But yeah, open a window, do it outside if you can, if you got a Pinecil. Alright, I'm kind of doing this a little prematurely since I opened it, but I'm going to go ahead and put some flux down. You don't need a ton, but it can be cleaned off and it's going to make life easier, so you don't have to worry about how much you put on. Alright, let's strip a wire real quick so I can show you that. Usually it says on the side of the wire the diameter. This is 24 A8WG. This is stranded. So, as you can see, there's stranded and solid wire diameters on the wire strippers. You can kind of eyeball it. This is what I do. I'll just eyeball it, give it a couple squeezes through the cutter part, and then up here is where you can grip the sheath to strip it out without damaging the wire. See? Easy peasy. We'll do another one real quick with just a razor blade. Okay. So I'm going to lay this down on the table. Sorry, I can't zoom in anymore. Anyway, with this laid on the table, I'm going to take the razor blade and just gently slice the sheath. Doesn't even have to go all the way around as long as you're slicing a few spots. I'm gonna use the pliers. You can grip the end gently, just enough to grab the sheathing. Boom. Good to go. Then you want to take the strands and twist them in your fingers so they're not frayed or anything like that. Man, I shouldn't have filmed this while my 3D printer was going. Shaking like crazy. Alright, anyway. So we've got it twisted. I dip it in my flux just a little bit. Get a little flux on there. And then I've got this handy stand for the Pinecil that I typically just leave the iron in. And I'll use that to solder, but sorry, getting a little distracted here. I forgot to mention that this wool in here is brass wool, not copper, not steel, 100% brass wool, and that's what you want to use to clean your iron tips. So just go to town in there, clean the solder off, scrape it a little bit so that it, you know, cleans the actual tip of the iron. And then while it's hot, add a little bit of solder to keep it tinned. If you don't keep it tinned, it'll oxidize and then won't heat anything up anymore. Okay, so I got some solder on here. I've got my wire with some flux. I'm gonna add a little bit more solder because I like to have a blob on the end, and then I will just put the wire onto the blob with a little bit of flux. And there you go. Tinned. It's not perfect. And I'll show you the other way here. Okay. So I'll put the iron in the holder. And I didn't show you twisting the wire, but I twisted this one behind the camera as I was moving that stuff around. I get a little bit of flux on there. Then you just heat the wire and add a little bit of solder, and you'll get a nice tin. This one's perfect, see? Much better than the first one. So that's why I like to use two hands for that instead. And then you can add a little bit of solder and use the capillary action of the wire, the heated wire, to draw the solder into it. Okay. So now we've got some tinned wires. Next, I cleaned the iron again. Put a little bit of solder on there. Now let's tin the pads on this board. To do that, I've already put the flux on. I've got solder here. What you're gonna do is use the flattest portion you can against the pad, and then add the solder to the pad, not the iron. One more time, you add the solder to the pad, not the iron. I'll show you right now. So I'm gonna hit this one right here. Flux is getting hot. Let's make sure I have enough on here to heat. All right, there we go. Adding solder to the pad, and boom. Let's move down the line here. Make sure you got enough solder on the iron or else it won't transfer heat too. Okay, so there we go, heating the pad. I didn't even need to add solder on that one. Sometimes you can do that where you can kind of eyeball it, add enough solder to cover the pad. I think I put too much on, so I'm gonna put it on this pad. Boom. See, tinning's very easy but very important. So I'll show you why in just a second. Okay, small pad. Okay, something to note, you don't have to keep the iron on the pad only. You can have it off the pad, but you need to be cognizant of the surrounding pads. So you don't want to be on two pads, but you can be off one pad. and the solder won't just randomly stick to that. There we go. Need a little more solder. Okay, there we go, pads are tinned. So the wire's tinned and the pads are tinned. I'm gonna tin these other ones real quick because this is the wrong wire to go on those big pads. So, okay, I'm gonna clean off the iron and I'm gonna add some more flux to a couple of these pads on the side. I'm just going to do these really tiny ones. Here we go. Okay. Got solder on the iron. Just go ahead when you're doing this, and if you use a tip like this, you can kind of angle, angle the tip so it doesn't touch anything else but still gets the job done. See? Not a lot going into this one. Just setting the iron down, heating the pad, and getting the solder on. Alright, these are tinned pretty well. Let's get the wire on there. Yeah. This one's a mess. Alright, good opportunity to show you how this works. If you can see right here, there wasn't enough flux to flow the solder properly. Kind of got, I don't know, stiff. I'm going to put some more flux on top of it. And instead of trying to flow it and fix it, I'm just going to try to take it off. So I put the flux on there. Put my copper braid over top of it. Oops, that's okay. I'm gonna add a little bit of solder to the iron. I know it seems counterintuitive to add solder, but it does work. And then I'm going to heat what's already on there. And there we go. Just the wicked up the messed up solder there, and we're good to go. Okay. Now let's put these wires on. We've got our wire tinned, but we don't have it trimmed. So what I'm going to do is use some flush cutters. You can use regular pliers with the wire snips, but it's hard to see. So I like the flush cutters better, and you can just come in and cut whatever length wire you think would fit that the best. I think half of what's on there will be good. Okay. Last thing to consider before you solder this on and make it semi-permanent is which direction those wires are going to be laying when you put everything together. Because if I solder it like this, which is what would make sense, then the wires are coming off. But a lot of times it's a stack, like the ESC flight controller, sometimes a VTX on top of that. So what you'll want to do is lay your wires the opposite direction, like this. You could use your tweezers here. Just a little bit of heat should be enough to melt the solder of both of these together. Okay. I'm not sure if you can see that. It's not the best joint in the world, but we can fix that. And this is where the tweezers might come in handy, because these little wires don't always want to play nice. You gotta hold them on the joint sometimes a little extra, so you can't really heat them or hold them. Okay, let's switch to the pliers, or excuse me, let's switch to the tweezers. Alright, let's tweezer it up. Alright, sometimes it takes me a couple tries, but yeah, this actually isn't that great. I'm having trouble seeing down here. My light's not bright enough for the workshop, so might need a new one of those. But this is good to show you all. But if things don't go your way the first time, it's no reason to get worked up about. Just add some flux. Try again. So here we go. I'm going to try again here. And by God, we got it! I think that looks pretty good. You guys can let me know if you can even see it. I'm sure it's not focused because it's a GoPro. But yeah, there's one wire. Now let's run some of these bigger ones. Just for fun, I'm gonna put this battery lead that, I mean, it looks awful, so I didn't do that. You can blame CNHL for that, but I'm just gonna go ahead and stick that right in the flux. And make sure I got enough solder on the iron. Let's see how this goes. So this is a really big joint here. Might take a little longer than, you know, than the other ones, but I haven't even changed the temperature of the iron, so that's playing a role too, of course. Alright, it's a little too much solder. Probably don't want it all blobbed out like that, but like I said, just trying to show you that the iron is hot enough to do these really big ones. Alright, last but not least, I think we just have to clean. Not really sure what else would be beneficial. Like, I suppose through hole. Could do a quick through hole. This is already tinned, by the way, so I'm just gonna go ahead and stick it in this hole here. Add a little flux. Make sure my iron has some solder on it, and we're gonna go for it. Okay, there we go. Alright, that's it for the soldering part of this tutorial, I think. Last but not least, we're going to go ahead and scrub this off, and I'll show you one more time what it looks like after you scrub it. This is just a regular old toothbrush, so just use a toothbrush and alcohol. You don't need anything special. Half of this stuff you don't really need. You can make do with a lot, you know, without a lot of it, but it's going to make your life easier. So I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back from cleaning. Here is what it looks like without flux all over. Wish I could zoom in a little more for you guys, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's it. You can tell a good joint because it's, you know, completely covering the pad. It should be shiny, and it should have enough to cover your wire also. Like this is a good one here. It has enough to cover the wire completely and then cover the pad, but it's not bubbling, or like this one is too much solder. This was the wrong pad to put that on, so I was just kind of showing you guys the Pinecil can heat up pretty thick wires, and I didn't change the temperature settings, but yeah, this would be an example of what too much solder looks like. And then these are pretty good. So anyway, there is an intro to soldering tutorial. If anybody has any questions, wants to call me out and say I messed something up or forgot something, leave me a comment. Yeah, and please subscribe if you like seeing any tutorials. I'd love to get some feedback from you guys, and anyone that's subscribed, I will take your suggestions as to, you know, what you'd like to see next.
Thank you for my FPT, and thank you for thriving. This is my normal PIF AD. This is my FD AD PD.
Okay. This is abnormal FPV?
This is my almost 50.
No, you just say this is abnormal FPV.
No, thank you for watching, and thank you for thriving. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching.